when I think of like fiat education. It's top down, it's dictated. It doesn't allow for that creativity you mentioned earlier. Teachers are forced to be line order cooks of education. It's like they're not chefs. They don't get to create a dish and then tweak it and then see what the feedback. It's very much like, here's your lesson, here you go. It always seems like people rise to power to tell other people what to do. That's that lead from behind kind of thing. And you want leaders from the front. And that's actually something that I learned as a teacher over the last couple decades. I became a much better teacher when I stopped telling kids what to do and started showing them what to do.
Hello, good day, my friends. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode today. We have Mr. Tim Niemeyer. He is the author of the book History Echoes Bitcoin, public educator for the past 18 years. And I know just from listening to your podcast episodes you've done before that you're also a co-host of a Bitcoin meetup over in Illinois. Yeah. You have a technology background in aviation. Or avionics. I'm not sure those are different. Lots of cool stuff. Very interesting background. Tim, thank you so much for joining me today, sir.
Thanks for having me, Ben. It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to the rip.
Yeah, so as I was talking about in the intro, like where am I right now? You can see this beautiful building behind me. I am actually at my college that I went to school at earlier in life. I graduated here from the University of Washington back in 2017, and I thought, a few things converged in the last few months. I was back home with my family in Christmas time, and I live in the Seattle area. So I thought, why not go back and just grab an Airbnb close to where I used to go to school and just work on a podcast from my old stomping grounds. That'd be fun. At the same time, I knew I wanted to talk about this topic of education with people and Bitcoiners and sort of the looking at this whole past I've had in a new lens now that we know about Bitcoin. Like this is now I'm kind of behind enemy lines of fiat education as we speak, man. I can remember the stuff that they were teaching me, and it's not altogether true now that we know as we go down the rabbit hole of Austrian economics and all that good stuff. So yeah, I just think that would be a super cool contrast there. So
and you're roughing the weather. I like that.
Yes, it is. We are deep in winter right now, full jacket. I love doing episodes outside. I do as many podcasts outside as possible. It's always fun.
I'll get in the sunlight too. I love it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man, why don't we just start with your story? Just some background on your life and career, because you spent 18 years in education, or at least that's the last I heard, was around almost 20. So give us some background on you, sir. What is your story coming to here, and how'd you find Bitcoin?
I'm from in the middle of a cornfield in Illinois, central Illinois, not near Chicago, not near St. Louis, And my father was a farmer. I realized that wasn't really the path I wanted to take. So I went into the military. I was in the Air Force, and I was an avionics technician. So planes anymore are flying computers. I just fixed the computers. After that, I said, what do I want to do? And I just kind of had a knack for education. I got a degree in psychology, teacher education, and started teaching 5th grade. I did that for 8 years, taught 4th grade for another 5. And this whole time I've been a musician. I'm a guitarist, played in bands and, musicals and wedding bands and, just all the local stuff. And a job opening came for music teacher. So I've been the music teacher, elementary music teacher for the last 5 years. And somewhere in between that 4th grade to, I guess it's been 6 years ago, right around 2018, I found Bitcoin and slowly started learning. And I took my lumps and learned just like with shitcoins and the rest. You had to learn your lessons the hard way. And then 2020 hit and they say everything changed, but what changed was the shock to the system of the deep understanding of the flaws of our system and the flaws of crypto and, in general. And from that point, I shifted to Bitcoin only, started co-hosting Lincoln Land Bitcoin here in Springfield, Illinois, started thinking more deeply, which led to me writing more. I never wanted to be a writer, but it was more of like, the best way to get your ideas out is to put them on page. You know what I mean? So did a couple articles for Bitcoin magazine, a couple articles here and there. And then I decided to write History Echoes Bitcoin in 2023, I want to say. Self-published that, figured out I want to do more of that. So I started Zoom Out, like you mentioned, the podcast. I got 40, 60 episodes deep, maybe. And that I parlayed that into more writing, more freelance writing. And as of right now, I'm freelance writing for Mara, the Bitcoin miner. So loving doing that, doing content marketing there, writing for here and there and elsewhere. I also just finished creating the curriculum, helping Gabe Lord of Operation Bitcoin finish the curriculum for that to help veterans kind of understand money, understand Bitcoin. We're starting a cohort here just in a few weeks. So kind of just trying to find out where my skills fit best and help people understand Bitcoin. That's kind of where I'm at. And that's why we're here now.
I'm glad to hear you're a music teacher, because I feel like since you are teaching a creative subject, you sort of get a free pass to thrash the actual, like math and science and these like super technical things, because creativity is inherently like it's subjective. It's free flowing and there's not a lot of rigidity around it. So if I were to ask you to define for our listeners, what would you consider fiat education? Because I know fiat is this word we like to use as sort of an adjective. This is, things that are birthed and raised in the fiat standard, where there's infinite money printing. The government is able to basically fund all these public schools, and they force down these the curriculums people should have. And it causes all these wonky incentives that have really made education get kind of a bad rap from a lot of Bitcoiners, people like Saifedean Ammous and Daniel Prince. I'm sure you know both of them. And the more that I've listened to those guys really talk about the problems with fiat education and why, homeschooling is an option for a lot of people that they should listen to and think about. What is your view on all of this as someone who's inside the system yourself?
To preface that a little bit, one, I'm separating the people from the system. There's a lot of people who will say all teachers, are this way, and that's absolutely not true. There's a lot of good people, well-intentioned people trying to do the right thing. That being said, there is the system. And if I could put it on a word, like, because saying fiat to a normie, you've already lost them. They might think of the car company, right? A more pointed word would be centralized. And historically, I've grown to become much more libertarian the older I get. I kind of was on both sides, called myself a centrist. And then started digging into Ron Paul. And that got me into Austrian economics and where we are today. But sorry, my dog's moving around my camera. But centralization is what I think of when I think of like fiat education. It's top down, it's dictated. It doesn't allow for that creativity you mentioned earlier. Teachers are forced to be line order cooks of education. It's like they're not chefs. They don't get to create a dish and then tweak it and then see what the feedback. It's very much like, here's your lesson, here you go. Now, the position I'm in as a music educator, it worked out perfectly on that switch, because that's why I was feeling that way before I got into music. And now that I'm in music, I have a little bit more leeway, just a little bit, I get to choose my lessons. But overall, that top-down structure is fairly apparent. And I think that's when I hear fiat education, that's what I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the points that you just mentioned there, I want to really highlight, because I could not agree more, how the people within the system are so often great. They're good. I just truly believe people are good. It is the system that is rotten. And, so many of us who went through this, modern educational system, myself included, I went through the whole thing all the way through universities that you see right here. I have amazing memories from a lot of the teachers I had throughout those years.
Yeah.
And the more I really think about it now, the thing that made those teachers so good was the fact that they were actually going against the grain that was probably sort of nudging them, So what does that say to me? It says, like, just like we said, the people are the good part. It's not actually the school that's the good part. It's the people that are in the system that are good and really care about teaching kids and helping them. They just don't really have a full understanding of the system that they're in. And I even look back at some of the teachers that I had now who taught certain subjects and were doing the absolute best of their ability to teach it well. But some of the things that they were teaching was straight up wrong because it was coming down from these fiat books and the textbooks that are given down that are just giving out propaganda in the purest sense. So what are your thoughts on how we can bridge that? Like, is the system savable? Can we sort of have like a teacher level education where we try to orange pill all these teachers to learn about Bitcoin and figure out all these lies that are being said? Or do you think it's going to take more of a disruptive outsider approach of more people going the homeschooling route that could potentially change the educational system? And do you think it would then be saved? It's kind of hard to make simple questions here with such a big topic. I don't even know how to make it a small question.
So much. Big. No, it is, and you shouldn't try and make it a small question because it does affect everything. And if there's anybody who tries to sell you a quick fix or a simple solution, they're speaking out there, So it's funny because it took me a while. Once I realized, as like Mike Hobart is saying, about the fish in the fishbowl don't even recognize they're in the fishbowl. You know what I mean? You got to first see outside the matrix kind of thing. Once I kind of understood that, I also understood a side point that I'm in it right now. So to drastically change it, that's like drastically changing my life. And imagine, extrapolate that to every teacher in the system. So do I think there's going to be one quick fix to? No. And doesn't matter how right Bitcoin is, change takes time, right? I believe Bitcoin is the truth. It is a foundational layer that we can build upon and grow. But as quick as we get it in there, it's still not going to people aren't going to wake up like this, right? And I'm going to be kind of going all around trying to touch all points. You mentioned homeschooling. I am a huge proponent of homeschooling. Obviously, if I wasn't teaching during the day, I would homeschool my own kids. Are you familiar with Scott Lindbergh and his work, Bitcoin Homeschoolers?
I don't know that name. Yeah. It doesn't ring a bell.
Reach out to Scott Lindbergh. That's going to be a great conversation. He is putting together Bitcoin Homeschoolers. There's Me Premier Bitcoin. They have that Bitcoin diploma. I mentioned Operation Bitcoin for the veterans. That actually, we're a node on the Me Premier Bitcoin network. So we get to adapt their curriculum for veterans. So I see that happening, and I see that more as a safety net, catching the people who are disillusioned or fall out of the system or whatnot. But our society, our kids, the way they are now, I don't believe could handle that big of a shock. I don't think many parents who are used to, I'm trying to find a nice way to put it, who, I hate to say on the dole, but people who are in the system that benefit from that system, there's going to be a huge shock and they won't know how to handle that. So, I mean, where do you go with this? I think you let the people out, and the people who are getting out, the people who are opening their eyes through Bitcoin, they're going to be the one. Like, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but what's the phrase? It's like Bitcoin only benefits those inside the system, right? Inside Bitcoin. I think that's going to be true for the homeschooling, obviously. You're not going to be able to fix everybody, but we're going to start to slowly build. I think it's going to be a slow transition. And then at some point, there's going to have to be a tipping point. I don't know what that looks like. Now, I'm speaking very high level, not specific. So maybe maybe we could direct that a little more pointed so I don't just rant.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I said, this is a tough one to talk about. It's one of those things where the status quo is so deep that thinking about trying to even wrap your head around how do we move this monster around? How do we turn the ship? It's tough. Yeah. It's really tough. But what I would
ship, the harder it is to turn. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's really cool to hear your thoughts on homeschooling are very positive, even as someone who works as a teacher, because I think that's what we need. Need more teachers within the system to be more open-minded to these things.
Mm-hmm.
And the one of the more optimistic views I have is that once the fiat money printer goes away and Bitcoin, makes it irrelevant, the forces they're able to centralize the whole system in such a way to really push these curriculums onto teachers and just have a very cookie cutter path that the government wants for the students is going to be weakened. That's not going to be as strong of an assembly line as they want it to be. It's going to be. I think the teachers will naturally gain more freedom to teach the way that they want to teach and use their creativity and be flexible and give students a true, like a more enriched learning experience. Would you agree with that?
Now, watch out, Ben. Your Austrian economics is showing. It's good ideas don't require force, right? And the free market of ideas allows good ideas to flourish, and the centralized top-down system doesn't allow it. It takes all the air out of the room, right? It doesn't allow for all these other things to flourish. Like, I mean, if you want to talk specifics, just property tax funding, education, right? I mean, right there. So even if I wanted to homeschool, I'm still having to pay. So there's money out of my pocket to where I can make that decision to homeschool, right? And somebody who's wanting to build a school, they have to or homeschool, for example, they already have that competition, that moat, that was what I'm looking for, monopoly on education. They're fighting against that. So you're absolutely right. As Bitcoin continues to proliferate, and simultaneously, I guess we're assuming that fiat will lose some of that footing in the process, that allows for that steady transfer. Now, will it be sloppy? Absolutely, because anything new is sloppy, and it should be, because that's how you learn. Like you mentioned earlier, that top-down system is, here is what you're doing, and this is how you're doing it. That doesn't really allow for real collaboration that enacts meaningful change.
Yeah, this is why it's such a blessing to have Bitcoin in our lives and the world right now, because it really does fix such a root of all these problems. And there's no way for us to sit here and, know exactly how it's going to go down, what's going to happen when the Bitcoin officially frees the people from the fiat enslavement that they don't even know they're in.
Yeah.
It's going to be crazy. It's going to be really wild. And here in 2025, it seems like every single year things are accelerating. I mean, right now we're hearing all this talk about the Bitcoin strategic reserve and, where the laws are going to be. And meanwhile, as all this are happening, more and more people are just, going down the rabbit hole slowly but surely. Every single touch point people get on Bitcoin is bringing them more into it. And so it's going to be really crazy to watch. And this is why I feel so blessed to have a podcast as you do as well, just to make sure we have a strong network of people to try to wrap our heads around this thing as it moves through this transition. And it's going to be a crazy time. Do you have any predictions about like what that transition is going to look like on the educational side? Do you think it could, well, I mean, like you said, there's going to be sloppiness in places because it's a huge shift. Whenever you're turning a gigantic aircraft carrier of a system 180 degrees, it's going to be a little messy. So as someone who now understands, the power of homeschooling and the problems with the current educational system, how do you foresee the shift happening? Let's say, we go on a Bitcoin standard tomorrow. What's going to happen? How does that reverberate throughout this educational system, which right now is really attached to the government at the hip?
I've thought about this, actually, this question long and hard, and it takes some suppositions. You got to kind of assume certain things will happen. So let's say Bitcoin goes to the moon, whatever the moon is. You're going to have a lot of people who are filthy rich, you can say, whatever you want to call it. You could talk about what are they going to do with their funds. Like, there are going to be people who want to donate to charities or set up like Me Premier actually, I believe, started with a donation as well. There's a lot of, or I'm sorry, that might be right, but Bitcoin Beach, right? Bitcoin Beach started with that donation. So could there be things like that? Local donations popping up around little educational centers? I would think that would be a good way to start. And then also of these Bitcoiners who now don't have to work, they get to work. Like me personally, I would love to work on those things with my time, because it's not just about money, it's also about time, like who is going to run it, who's going to coordinate and all that. So I would think it's incumbent upon the Bitcoiners to help build that. And where does that pop up? Wherever they are locally. So it goes back to that phrase that the thing that I love about Bitcoin, it is the embodiment of think globally, act locally, right? We're globally connected. We get to see the truth across the network, but we're all still physical bodies. So we need to act in our communities. I actually got into, before I got into writing for Bitcoin Magazine back in the day, I was talking with a family member of mine who's actually, pretty successful in many different areas. And I was asking her, I was like, I want to get into Bitcoin. And she's like, well, you got to build up a little bit of resume. And she's like, what do you want to do? And I said, similar education, specifically education for like low income and low socioeconomic status students, some kind of charity, some kind of building up the community around us. Because as good as Bitcoin works, it works because of people using it and using it well. And because it's truth, I also think of it as a big karma machine, if you want to get esoteric. And what am I going to do with my karma, my digital karma? You know what I mean? So I guess to put a pin on that, it is about the communities. It's about the Bitcoiners in their local areas. What are they going to do to step up?
I love that think globally, act locally framework. That's super good. I think that's a good way for all of us people who are in this Bitcoin game, who are stacking sats, and we see what's coming. We want to think about the whole world and how we want to shift it in a good direction. I think that that's such a universal thing in the Bitcoin world. We really do care about, fixing all these problems at the root level so it can organically heal. All these systems can heal themselves naturally. But in order to really do that, we can't always be thinking super macro. We sometimes have to be acting micro, and in our own, starting with our own family, starting with ourselves, our family, and then our community, and sort of work your way out, but really focus on the smaller ones. Make sure that those are absolutely dialed, because it's going to take more and more people, just focusing on those fundamentals first and making sure you don't get too lost in the higher stuff.
And you could say that more on a societal level too. It's like you see in social media or whatever, politics, what have you. It always seems like people rise to power to tell other people what to do. That's that lead from behind kind of thing. And you want leaders from the front. And that's actually something that I learned as a teacher over the last couple decades. I became a much better teacher when I stopped telling kids what to do and started showing them what to do. You know what I mean? Some of them I have to drag along like, nope, we're doing this because we're going to get better. We're not going to waste our time. We're not going to, but I think Bitcoin gives that option, the financial freedom, the freedom of time, and the freedom of individual action. So now I can be empowered to create whatever I think is right for and do it in a way that, and if I'm wrong, the free market will show me. And then that idea goes away, which is a good thing. It's like you mentioned earlier, fiat doesn't allow for that to go away. It's just like we keep adding on to the problem. We keep throwing money at it. And it's like, and the money keeps getting less valuable. It's unsustainable. And I don't see how people don't see that.
Yeah, completely. I think that part of the reason why most people don't see it is because it just is such a paradigm shifter that even if the information is out there to figure it out, so many just don't want to know. I think we're sort of getting to that point in the knowledge curve right now where
Overturning
they're
and shifting. Yeah.
yeah, we're like maybe 5 years ago, a lot of people literally actually had no clue about Bitcoin and the corruption of whatever field they're in, whether it be education, medicine, name any industry. Basically, they're all fiat now. Um, they may have legitimately thought that that their industry is good and it's full of good people, and there may be little problems, but it's overall a good system. But now I think just in the last 5 years, people have really come around to thinking, okay, there are some big problems here, but they're still sort of stuck in not going all the way and just completely accepting that the whole thing needs to be uprooted, because it would basically be admitting that your whole upbringing was a lie, your whole education was a lie, all the money you spent on tuition. And I can use personal example. My school I'm at, the University of Washington, I had a lot of friends who went to the medical school here. It's a very high level medical school in the university standards.
Mm.
And I still keep in touch with a lot of those people, but they are not really most of them are not really getting through the steps as fast as I've been able to as an outsider, just having a completely open mind. It's hard to have an open mind when you've been so indoctrinated to have a closed mind and follow the guidelines. So what do you think is the way that we help open these minds of the people who are inside these systems, whatever they may be, to just become more absorbent and more of a sponge to these ideas that we now have so much information out there, so many podcasts, so many articles, books,
Yeah.
things that really walk them through the steps, but it seems like they're just scared to really take that leap. What do you think we can say to those people?
Well, when you say those people, that we have to acknowledge that those people are all different, and they all have different learning styles, and they all have different likes, and you have to reach people where they're at. I mean, like, making a podcast, like I made content for years, and I made it in my vision. At the same time, I tried to work towards the intended audience, but that intended audience is not one person. So you really have to split it up. Like, I keep going back. It's right on the brain. Operation Bitcoin. That's for veterans specifically, right? We have to meet the people at their likes, at their learning style. If they're more visual or auditory, or if they're more mathematical or whatever. We have to analyze individuals and know what their likes, what's the best way to learn, and what do they know so far. You have to find what we call in education the zone of proximal development. If I start out talking about the difficulty adjustment to somebody who isn't a math, bam, I lost them. So it's harder. Abe Lincoln always said, if you give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'll take the first 4 to sharpen my axe. Well, it really is that when you're talking to people, because each person is different, and you have to analyze them specifically before you can get to, okay, this is how I'm going to come across.
Yeah, that's what you learn from being a teacher, I'm sure, better than anyone. That's like your bread and butter right there. Steak and butter, I should say. I need to stop using these fiat terms.
Hey, I love it. I was reading your carnivore stuff earlier. I'm with you now.
Are you on a carnivore train? Let's go.
I'm pretty animal based, let's say.
Okay, yeah. Cool. Yeah, it's a fun ride, man. That is, I mean, that's the classic first. Like, so many Bitcoiners go through that one next, the carnivore side, because a lot of the big Bitcoin names are also on that one. Like Saifedean was the one that really got me thinking about it, because I just saw him just like trashing people on Twitter for saying that fruit is good for you, and I was like, what? Like, of course fruit is good for you. What do you? That's vitamins. But just when someone is so right about so many things, like Saifedean is, like on the economic side, he's just such a true pioneer in the connecting the fiat world to the Bitcoin world and telling us how it's all connected. You can't help but just open your mind to these other ideas they have. And carnivore was one of his that I just latched onto and started learning more about. And lo and behold, he's right about that too. And, even the stuff he's talking about right now, he's been going really hard on the Israel-Palestine stuff, the Zionism. that's another thing that for a while I sort of kind of like, I didn't disagree with him, but it was kind of on the back burner for me. I was like, that, like, how is this
Same.
really relevant to me? Like, I just kind of want to stop the war altogether. I'm sure there's like nuances, but the more of this stuff I'm reading and the more I'm studying, I think he's spot on about this too. He's just one of those people who I respect so much because he just puts out so much signal. And I think this could be part of how I would answer what I mentioned earlier of, how do we help these people get out of the rut that they're in, the fiat rut, and open their mind a bit. A lot of folks really do need a good leader figure, and I know that a big part of the Bitcoin ethos is be your own leader and be self-sovereign and make sure you aren't, a follower. But for some of the people that are in that old paradigm, they're so accustomed to following leaders and
Right. That's a
authority
good point.
figures. So that kind of fits their mold a little bit more. We just need to help put good authority figures on their radar, people like Saifedean and good Bitcoin writers, and people like yourself, for people that are in the educational world looking for that, like, I think that could be a good first step.
Well, and to kind of cycle back to what I was mentioning earlier, it's like you have to lead by example. Like the carnivore diet, it turned a lot of my health around. I'm 47 now, and I'm in the best health I've been in. Like, I'm not. That's no joke. I mean, a couple injuries, just being old, but I truly believe that. So it's like, you don't want to trust a bald barber. You don't want to trust an overweight doctor, that kind of stuff. It's like, if you want somebody to be that leader, they have to lead by example, and across multiple areas of life. You have to show the proof of work, and the proof of work is not just some certificate, that you get at some institution.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's so smart, and because I love the fat doctor example is such a classic, and I know that the carnivore docs like Ken Berry and Sean Baker, they're always talking about that. How, well, first of all, Sean Baker just put out an amazing rant yesterday that went super viral of just, physicians, you need to wake the fuck up. And he just goes off for like 5 minutes and just, he's usually a really chill guy. A lot of people don't understand this. He sort of broke the door down by going on Joe Rogan and talking about carnivore, but he's not a toxic person. He's very level-headed. He's very chill. But yesterday he went non-chill, and that's why people loved it so much. Just because, like, every now and then he's had to go for it,
And the videos of him just sitting there eating the steak while somebody just goes off, that was cracking up. I got to meet him down in Nashville.
I did too, actually. Yeah, I met him there too. Yeah, he was. Were you at the
ribeye eating?
Oh yeah, I was there too. Yeah. So we were both there.
Cool, we were right there.
Yeah,
that, and he's sitting here polishing off 4 or 5 while somebody else is on 2.
He won. Right? He win the contest?
He won by like a steak.
He's a monster. Absolute savage. Yeah, that was super fun. I got to meet a lot of cool people. I got to meet Ken Berry briefly. He had to run somewhere, so I didn't get to talk super long. Met Sean Baker. That was super cool. Jimmy Song was there. Texas Slim, of course.
Yep.
So many awesome people in that event. So it was really well put on by the Beef Initiative. Really appreciated that just connection opportunity with all these meat lovers of the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but you're really seeing these people who have figured it out, who have woken up, like yourself in the educational world, Sean Baker, Ken Berry in the physician doctor world. And they're starting to turn up the heat a little bit across the board of just, we really need to speed this up, guys. Like, I think that for myself personally, I mean, here's one example. The Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, when he put that country on a Bitcoin standard, what was it now, like 4 years ago? Was it 2021?
It's been at least 3 or 4, yeah, something like that.
It's either 2020 or 2021. It's been like 4 or 5 years, I think. And I remember watching that, and I certainly thought, oh man, we're off to the races now. Like, every country is going to start flying for it. The dominoes are starting to drop. Here we are, like 4 years later, and there are like a couple other small ones. There wasn't really a big, floodgates opening event. So,
but that was a 0 to 1 moment, right?
You
needed that to happen before the floodgates, right?
Yeah,
it wasn't going to be all at once.
Yeah, and so we have a lot of these examples where there are a few really good examples out there of people or even countries in this example who have broken out of the fiat paradigm.
Yeah.
And it's hard to not get impatient. Like, how are more people not figuring this out? How is this not exploding more? And this is one of the reasons why I am really excited about Nostr. Have you been into Nostr at all?
I'm in it. I don't post much. I check it frequently. Maybe
Hmm.
not as much as I check X, just out of habit. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm all on board. I love the idea. I love where it's going.
Yeah, like to me, this has become almost as much or even more of a theme on the show as Bitcoin in the last, several dozen episodes, because I think it really it removes so much friction from the communication, and communication is so key to getting these messages across to more people, removing the fear of people to talk about this stuff since they're afraid that they'll be deplatformed. I think
Yeah.
that's a big friction point, and it's just I think that could be the lubrication that really just sets this thing
Well,
off on a lot of
now
different levels.
now you're now we're just jamming on this. I love this because that gave me the idea. So in education, teachers communicate with families many different ways: emails, phone calls, but they also have all these apps now. Like Class Dojo is a famous one where you can give like points for and against, and then and then send pictures and videos and all. Nostr based homeschool education. Go. That's your communication tool. You got zaps going everywhere. You get paid that way. You get your communication. You send all my files through that. It's your data, right? You now have all the records. Let's get on it. I got a business proposition for you, Ben. Here we go.
Yeah, and think about like if students are getting zapped for like good work,
Oh my
what's
God.
wrong with that?
That's
What do you think? I mean,
Bitcoin Beach. That's how they started out, right? They would give
yeah,
sats
yeah.
as they would learn. And it worked.
Now, do you think there would be any downsides to bringing in like monetization to the educational system, or do you think that would be all good and a really good
And
incentive
here's the
for
beauty of
children to learn better?
permissionlessness. Who fucking cares? I mean, I'm not trying to be a dick, but who cares? It works. You have to opt in. If the parent doesn't want to, then that's something else. But if the parent's like, yeah, let's go, whose business is it? Sorry, my libertarian is showing. So
I love it. I love it. And yeah, I think it just unlocks so many new possibilities and so much creativity that can be made around the educational process, because you could have maybe you'd have a different view than me, but like
no.
sort of uh, like private schooling system, like little communities of homeschooling where they have sort of their own little central bank of Bitcoin, where they have like a budget for the amount of zaps that can go to students for
Yep.
achieving certain tasks.
Tell me that couldn't
And
be coded up and AI'd and all of that.
yep. And since it's on Bitcoin, a lot of people when they hear AI, they just think, "Oh, that's scary. That's bad. It's it's going to take away learning opportunities or something." But
It's a tool like everything else.
yeah,
It's like how
yeah,
you use it.
yeah. And I think that for me personally, I'd love to hear your take on this. Actually, just more elaboration on that. But I, if I didn't know about Bitcoin, I would be much more black pilled on AI than I am now. I think that as long as we make sure Bitcoin becomes a standard and AI is a part of that on top, it will be massively beneficial, because there will be that scarcity component there that won't let it just take things completely off the rails. So, what are your thoughts on AI on a fiat standard versus a Bitcoin standard? How those different futures would look?
I would love that. Was it within the last year? Didn't Saylor kind of dig into that? How I'm trying to remember back how AI and Bitcoin work together, and everything is maybe it might not be Saylor,
I
but
don't know about Sailor, but a couple of the people that have really put out great content for the Bitcoin world, I know Guy Swan had a whole
oh, of
side
course, yeah,
podcast, the AI Unchained. I
yep,
haven't listened to that in a while, but I know he was diving into that. Jeff Booth has talked a lot about it as well. Those
that's
two
right,
guys kind
that's
of
right.
come to mind for me.
Yeah, and maybe I'm just kind of mixing them all up because I hear the podcasts. I think that works. I think it's the native internet currency. It makes sense to have AI paired with Bitcoin. I would think if I was a tech guy with a business mindset, entrepreneurial mindset, I'm looking for new markets. You got to create your own category, right? I would think somebody out there with a passion for education would be able to say, I can make this work. I can set up AI. I can get paid in Bitcoin by Bitcoiners to help teach their kids, not just Bitcoin, but I mean, STEM, whatever, reading, writing, arithmetic, whatever. I would think it would take a handful of motivated people who have their eyes open. Like, and I'm already jumping to the next step. It's like, you need a tech guy. You need a business guy, right? You need an educator. What else would you put into that? I mean, you could put a handful of people, but like you would need my point is you would need a small group of people to make that a reality. Like think of the overhead versus the fiat system. Think of the entire teachers union, the teacher retirement system, the teachers.
Yeah, it seems like, and this is
worked
sort
up,
of,
Ben. Now I want to do this.
yeah, to me, the more I think about it, the more I try to just visualize the future where Bitcoin and AI are together. Because I remember when the first stories we heard about how AI was really starting to take off just in the last half decade or so. And, you hear all these stories about how, teachers in these schools don't know what to do because all of a sudden their students are, they can write their entire essays just by throwing it in a prompt. And so the first thought that most people have is like, oh, that's bad. Like these kids are being robbed of their creative process. But, the other side of the coin is, if a robot can do this work, is that really what humans should be focusing on? Is it a good thing to pass these things off to the robot so humans can be their full creative selves and just create, do more important things and achieve higher goals? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's important to point out that the coin has two sides. For example, like the joke that, I went to high school in the 1900s, let me say. I went to school in the 1900s. And the joke was, well, you're never going to go around with a calculator in your pocket. And now what do we have, right? So kids don't have certain skills that do get displaced and that you can't just wash that away. Like, for example, GPS, my kids can't read a map very well. You know what I mean? So technology does have other effects. That being said, I would think that also frees you up for just unlimited creativity because you got the heavy lifting. It's like I can build not only a building faster, but more detailed now because I have all of these tools, right? Now, fiat, you can argue that fiat kind of keeps us from expressing that creativity. But I totally agree that having those at your disposal are tools, and you got to teach them to use the tools, not only for what you're talking about, but where the job's going to be in the future, right? You don't see any gas pump operators or elevator operators as much anymore. People can do that on their own. It's like little things like that. So we also have to be teaching the skills to what that future might look like. And do we need cursive anymore? I was taught it. Were you taught cursive? Besides your signature?
I was, but it would be so bad. If I tried to write something, it'd be terrible.
Besides your signature for a check, when else do you use it?
Yeah. Even just my regular handwriting, non-cursive, I can tell, like, because I spend so much of my time, like everyone else, on a computer typing, my typing is fantastic. I'm a really good, fast typer, but when I take a few months off of writing things, when I write something, I'm like, oh man, this is terrible.
As an educator, like in the classroom, like my handwriting was atrocious. I had fourth grade girls that could handwrite me, and it was a shame. But
yeah, but that's just another one of those skills where it's. And you're talking about the different jobs, like the gas pump workers, the cashiers, the truck drivers. Maybe you could throw that in there. All these things that we just consider, jobs. Like that's such a big word used in the media right now. It's used as such a high metric of how good we're doing. How many jobs do people have? How many people are working these stupid jobs that could be like, could be passed along to robots, and humans could be freed up to do other things. But people view this as a negative when people lose jobs because that's such a metric in itself, when I think the metric should be changed to, something else. Like, what are your thoughts on that? How
100%.
you change it? Yeah.
100%. Because wouldn't it be, how do I want to say that? Wouldn't it be better if more people didn't need jobs, right? My thought is that Bitcoin has that ability. It's that rising tide lifts all boats, right? Obviously, early adopters benefit more than later adopters. But over time, that gives those people the ability to free themselves up, not only for their own time, but that they don't need to be working to get a job, right? They don't need to be So now they have all this time. And as goods and services continue to grow against a fixed, supply, more and more people get to release themselves from that workforce. Is that the most equitable way? No, but it's probably the most equitable way in my mind. That's fair. That's not centrally controlled. That there's not picking winners and losers. It's like we're giving our time, energy, and karma to a system that respects it in Bitcoin. Whereas in fiat, we're giving our time, energy, and karma to a system that loses it over time. The whole Michael Saylor's adiabatic system, an adiabatic system it's a lossless system. It keeps everything, the power inside of it. So that's what Bitcoin is to me, and it allows us to have at least the hope that as time continues, less and less people have to work. More and more people get to be pulled up. Like, that's the hope, at least.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that that's a really good high level overview. And I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into the meat of exactly how Bitcoin would take us from this current feeling of, people, let's just use one example, a cashier at McDonald's, they're all being replaced with kiosks. So in the fiat paradigm, we say, that's a bad thing, like, because it's just going to funnel more money up to the corporation, does not help the people, does not help the individual. But on the Bitcoin standard, I would say it does help the individual because their savings are, in a sound money currency, and we should be like applauding these efficiencies being added. So how would you really elaborate on how, I kind of struggle with explaining this to people, actually, because, but I noticed that scarcity component of Bitcoin that really makes it a good thing for these jobs to be, taken away for the robots, when under fiat they're a bad thing. So how do you bridge that A to B gap from fiat to Bitcoin?
Oof.
It's a tricky one. Like I said, I
don't know if
struggle to explain this to people. It's
Yeah,
tough.
I don't think I'm going to answer that directly, but if I could, where my mind is going is slightly off of what you were asking, but feel free to steer me around. I think in addition to the supply cap of 21 million, the other factor is the decentralization, and it goes back to the thinking globally, acting locally, whereas the McDonald's example, going up through corporations, that's a centralized system. Whereas we can work together. We can provide goods and services for each other in communities the way exact communities need. My community is similar but different than yours, right? So we don't have to have the same answer, just the same thing we were talking about in education. So to try and kind of bring it back to the other part of the conversation, I think that allows the value to be dissipated. The Cantillon effect or Cantillon effect, or however you pronounce it. Whichever way it is, I always say it the wrong way, those closest to the money spigot benefit the most. Well, if you think about, and I know I keep going back to Highview, but if you think about Bitcoin, it's putting faucets all over every community, right? So literal power to the people, digital power to the people. And in doing that, you don't have to, those people, the McDonald's worker, all it'll take is a little bit of incentive and a little bit of like vision from, like we said earlier, a leader saying, this is the way to do it. Create your own business. Go create your own store. raise your own crops, this kind of stuff that benefits your local community. You get paid in the Bitcoin. You get your value, your time, your energy, your karma stored. That to me is how it happens. In whatever ikigai kind of like, what's your passion, what's your skills, what's your all of that, take that, provide it to your local community. It could be your neighborhood. It could be the neighborhood next door. And that in that way, that helps the system not only be sustainable, but grow.
I'm glad you brought Ikigai up because I recently had on Jason Sellers. I'm not sure if you know him, but
Yeah.
he goes by Geeky Guy on on the social, which is I love those names. I think this is a sort of topic I'd love to just bring up anytime I can on a podcast because it's so powerful as a framework for people to figure out what their purpose is. Because there's so many people out there. I mean, look, I'm on my college campus right now. When I was going to school here, I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. I feel like none of these people walking around behind me know what they want to do. It's so common for people to just go through that very long, drawn out phase of just what the fuck am I here for? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? I think the Ikigai model is really powerful. So could you give a rundown of, just start with, for people who haven't listened to my other episodes, what is the Ikigai and how do you view it and use it in your own life?
Since you're putting me on the spot, I'm doing a Google search just to get a good definition to start with, if you will. It's a Japanese concept referring to something that gives a person a sense of purpose, a reason for living. So, like, personally, what I feel like I'm on the more creative side. I have a technical background. I'm a people pleaser, so education makes sense. I have the music background. I like to entertain. So like my classroom, especially my music classroom, I think of myself as an educational entertainer. You got to get the kids' attention. You got to keep their attention. I'm part autist, so I like to geek out like on Austrian economics and stuff like that. So it's like you put all that stuff together, it kind of makes sense that I found my way to Bitcoin education. You know what I mean? That's a personal example. Like, find what you're good at, find what you like to do, find how you can get paid to do it, and then just do it.
Yeah, and I just Googled it as well because the part that I actually love is the more like the four specific pieces of it. Yeah, and so I just looked this up with like the four parts. It's explore it's the four primary elements: what you love, what the world needs, what you're good at, and what you can get paid for. Those are the four pieces. And I think that just for people just laying that out and just drawing those four circles, like what is something that I know that fits into all of these? Because I know that I grew up in just sort of bouncing around between things that had like one or two of those circles, maybe three, but four is tough. It's tough to find that, but once you do, you got to go all in, I'd say.
I 100%. And I don't know if it's, well, if you take it back to fiat, something I learned in education is the poverty mindset. Are you familiar with that concept?
I don't think very deeply. Could you give us a rundown?
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you think about like, what does everybody need? First and foremost, you need shelter, you need food, you need security. And then you can start building on that and then building up to relationships. And at the peak of is self-actualization, right? And the poverty mindset is kind of like people who are poor are in that lower rung because they're always looking for their next meal. So their time preference is a very high time preference. It's just right here. Like the thought of, and I'm using extremes to make the point, but like stealing my food, well, that's going to satisfy my need right now. I can't look too far in the future to see if that's going to have any negative side effects. So, I mean, being a Bitcoiner, it's easier to see, maybe not for a normie, but it's easier to see people in fiat as people who are closer on that spectrum to the poverty mindset side of that spectrum. Does that make sense?
So what do you think is the best way that they can get out of that? I know we talked about a bunch of them here, and like the Ikigai is a good framework, but if you got a minute to tell someone in an elevator, someone that you can tell is in that poverty mindset, but they're about to go, say fly the other side of the world, and this is your last chance to give them your input, what would you say?
If I had a minute in an elevator, I'd pull the cord, or I do the elf thing where he like hits all the lights on the way down and be like, "We're talking about Bitcoin." No, and I would take hypothetically, I would try to take most of the time, like I mentioned earlier, to ask them their likes, like elicit that from them. Not really ask them about Bitcoin. What do you like to do? What are you good at? What do you think the world's missing? And then just riff with them. And I think you, as well as most Bitcoiners, have that ability to kind of like tie that right back into, oh, this is how Bitcoin fixes it. I mean, not to be cliche, but I haven't found a situation where I'm not in that is not like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's always a connection to the money. Always. Like the
Yes.
sound money is so foundational to society. And I just I agree. I think there's always a way to connect. It doesn't matter what they're interested in. It's just the challenge is on you as a friend who's trying to orange pill this person to figure out what that is. And sometimes they have to find it themselves too. They're just not going to listen until they walk down that path and they figure it out. Or as Bitcoin forces them to eventually. If once we're on the Bitcoin standard, it's just going to happen, and they're
You
going
can
to,
lead a horse to water, but you can't make him grok Bitcoin.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. That is the saying. it's and that's what we're going to see, and it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I'd love to take a little bit of a pivot here on
Sure.
your book. So we haven't talked much about your book,
Yeah.
History Echoes Bitcoin. I
Yeah.
just pulled it up last night, and I like the description actually on just the Amazon page, and I'll just read it off here. It says, History Echoes Bitcoin serves as a connection between history and the properties represented in Bitcoin. Of those are permissionlessness, gaining consensus, decentralization, trust minimization, censorship resistance, open source collaboration, immutability, and scarcity. Each one has shown throughout history to be beneficial to mankind. Each one has moved humanity forward in one way or another. Every historical example or non-example provided in this book serves as a lesson for us to either choose to learn from or ignore. I think that's super cool. And so what I would love to do is do a little bit of a speed round here, just go through each of those things. Those, I think, eight things that
Yeah.
you mentioned. And I'm just going to throw those at you again and just get your thoughts. And you don't have to be speedy. I'll be speedy at throwing them at you,
Oh,
but
sure.
I'd love to hear just your general case for, what each of these ideas played in history and the lens that you now look at it through Bitcoin, how that changes it. So starting with permissionlessness, go.
Wow. Okay. Permissionlessness. I mean, throughout history, you got to think that everybody, like from the kings and queens time frame, the more top down, more centralized, like, please sir, may I have another. If you think of the Catholic Church, you had to pay to get your sins absolved or whatever. I mean, you got to think the majority of those people that were underneath that system, which would probably be the majority of the population, they were like, man, if there's only a way wouldn't have to ask for permission, if we can just do it, right? So over time, we've developed systems, but most of them are centralized or have some fault, some weak spot. Bitcoin comes along, it's completely permissionless. You don't need to ask. So in a way, and I'm kind of like talking about the whole book, that's one arc throughout history. People have been searching for immutability. I'm sorry, permissionlessness. The same is true for all of these other ones. And they all just kind of came together and coalesced. That's kind of what I posit in the book. They all kind of came together and coalesced in Bitcoin. They give us all of those things.
You're not allowed to put them all together
I
in one
jumped to the
box. So I'm still
conclusion
going to
after
ask you each
chapter
one.
one. Sorry.
That's great. I love that. I love that though. Such a good example of, I mean, this has been such a consistent theme throughout history, is that when we centralize things into an institutional framework, efficiency is lost and human creativity is lost and we get bad outcomes. And when
Yeah.
you just give human beings the ability to be free and act the way that they naturally want to. And this is what Austrian
Provided they're not
economics is all
hurting other
about.
people, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing we got to fix for, and that's what local communities do. And I mean, I'll kind of move you forward in the gaining consensus chapter. Talked about the Grand Council of the Six Nations, right? So before the United States, all of the Indians of the East Coast, all the Indian tribes of the East Coast, they always were at war with each other. What did they do? They came together and created the Great Plan of Peace. And the Great Plan of Peace was very simple. It's like, hey guys, we're not going to attack each other. We're going to leave each other alone, but we're also going to support each other if somebody's being attacked, right? Outside forces. It's like, we'll back you up, but then you do you. That went on to be used as a basis by Benjamin Franklin. God, it's been a while since I'm going to say Benjamin Franklin and just move forward with that. I believe I'm right. I'm almost 50, so it starts to go. But that was the plan of peace was the basis for our Constitution, right? So gaining consensus, something we've been searching for throughout history. And now we have, thanks to Satoshi, we have Bitcoin. Byzantine generals problem solved. Boom.
Yeah. Beautiful. Love it. All right. Decentralization. Number 3, 2 down.
Now
there's so many examples through history. I don't even know where to start.
Like I'm wanting to cheat and bring up my book since I haven't read it in a few years.
Do it. Yeah, go grab it. I can cut out if you need to run and go grab it.
I got it on my computer.
Perfect.
I didn't want to cheat.
Do all the cheating you need.
I'm just being forward here, so being honest up front. Because the problem was when I was writing it, it's like, oh, this example, this vignette from history, right? It could be applied to many different properties. So I may end up using one that's not even in the right chapter. So decentralization, I would think you go, obviously, the printing press, you go to the internet, right? And with the printing press and the internet, it's just new ways to decentralize the information. You don't have to go to the church with the one guy in town who reads, or one of the few guys in town who read, to tell you what God says, or, as one example. So right there, now everybody has the ability to not only trade value, but understand the information embedded in that value, right? So that right there, I mean, you can't get much more decentralized. I don't know. I mean, now everybody literally has the truth ledger. I keep going back to. I mean, that's exactly what it is. You could, if you were religious, you could say the Bible is that truth ledger for religion, right? Internet, it freed up all of that information that might have been contained inside the walls of that building behind you. You know what I mean? Now everybody has it. Now we all have the ability to transact value and know what that value stands for, as opposed to somebody in an ivory tower saying, nope, it means this today because we wanted to, because it makes us look better.
Yeah, the decentralization of the church and the decentralization of the printing press is another example. I think so many of those were just spreading out the power to everyone to be able to take part in these things. So powerful. And there's no more bigger superpower than giving all the people the power of the money, because the money is one half of every single human transaction that we do today in the modern world. So that just is so empowering. Excellent. Number 4, trust minimization. Where's that popped up in history, and how do we look at it today?
I'm going to just read off what the vignettes in my dog.
Yeah, feel free to just read out of the book too.
Yeah,
That's
no,
great.
I have like story of this Victor Lustig, the guy who sold the Eiffel Tower to unwitting investors twice, even though he didn't own it. Obviously, the Federal Reserve, you know all the trust that goes into that. I don't know. Have you read the Creature from Jekyll Island?
I haven't yet. I really want to. I've heard so many good reviews.
Put it on the list, man. It's definitely, it needs to be on that list eventually. It doesn't need to be like the first thing first, like Bitcoin Standard. You mentioned Jeff Booth, Price of Tomorrow, and History Echoes Bitcoin. No, those two should be your first read for sure. But Charles Ponzi, the Navajo Code Talkers, that was a fun one. So you could imagine being able to, if the whole thing is about trust, in war, you can steal communication lines, right? And you would come up with codes, and then the code breakers would break those codes. Well, during World War II, America decided to use the Navajo because they had a language unlike any other language. It couldn't be deciphered using it was its own thing. And so then communication was strengthened through the war. That helped win the war. And it showed that it's not so much that we need to be able to trust this person or that person. It's just we need trustlessness, right? In a way. I mean, I could go on and on. The gold codes, like how... Anyway, I'm getting off track. We had examples and non-examples, but trust minimization, I could think throughout history, like just in my own personal life, like trusting the bank. It's not your money. There's no money. It doesn't have any value. That kind of thing. The 0% fractional reserve or the 10% fractional reserve. It's like there's so much trust in the system, and wouldn't it be great if we had a way not to trust? And we have that now.
Yeah. And you can hear the bells going off behind me.
I love it.
We got all kinds of, we're very dynamic episode. People feel like they're in a moment of history here.
I dig it.
One of the things that I think about is when you go back to the barter system where people had to use all these crazy things to trade with each other. So if one person is, trading, say, like 20 cows for a house or something, the other person is trading a house.
Yeah.
Both of those people require trust in that transaction because maybe the person's house has mold in it or is falling apart and they're not telling it. And maybe some of the cows are sick or something and they have, or they're older, have shorter lifespans. It creates this friction in the transaction where you don't know exactly what you're getting.
Well, and then that led to like single entry accounting or double entry accounting, which is still more centralized, right? So then you have to trust that central figure. So that's why I say a lot of these episodes can work through multiple ones, because like that centralization kind of forces the idea of trust, whereas the decentralization and the way Bitcoin operates, there is no, you can verify. You don't need to trust.
Yeah, and that's good. I mean, the less trust is required for people to transact, I think the better, because it really opens up all these opportunities to trade with people outside of your small community and your little bubble.
Yeah.
Because it just opens things up in such a massive way. That's what Bitcoin does. Bitcoin is a perfect example of something that you don't have to have any trust for the other person. You literally, you click the Zap button on Nostr and you instantly send value for the thing that they made. You send Bitcoin over on chain and you buy the house and go straight to their wallet. There's none of those examples we talked about where there could be something being hidden from somebody. It's all right there. It's fully transparent. So that's what makes it so powerful. So love it. Sweet. Halfway through these, it's a little bit cookie cutter, but I actually love just going through one at a time because I think every one of these is important. And,
I learned I'm just going to go away from the book. I'm just going to wing it because
sure.
I don't want to read to you. I don't want to read to your audience.
Sure. I mean, whatever works. I'm happy with getting my bedtime story read to me by Tim here tonight.
Feel free to give me a grade afterwards. Yeah.
All right. Censorship resistance. How about that one?
All right.
Man, there's so many different examples you can use for censorship.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just
listening to one of your episodes earlier on my walk down here talking about Socrates being like getting the ultimate cancel.
The ultimate cancel. And yeah, I mean, censorship, the thing that I've come to understand more recently is that it's not a tool to keep people out, but to keep people in. And I think that a portion of the population, and you can figure out who I'm talking about, but a portion of the population is siloed so much because of the concern, or at least whether you want to call it real or false, of misinformation or disinformation. To me, that I see this now from the last 4 years, let's just say, as that was a system keeping out that information, and that kept them lockstep thinking a certain way. And that's not democratic. That's not decentralizing. That is like, it's a very controlling thing. And I'm trying to choose my words wisely because I don't want to get political personally. I try and rise above that as much as I can. But having a system that resists censorship allows for that information to flow, and more information is better than less information. I mean, I think we can say that in any system, any computer system, right? If you have just a 1 and a 0, what are you going to do with that? The more information, the more possible combinations and the more brain power that, you could go on and on. So censorship resistance to me, or people who censor, are damaging society over the long term. It's not beneficial. You can't learn from a problem if you don't have an opportunity to solve the problem. And that goes all the way back to our education conversation, right? If the teachers can't even get in there and say, this is wrong and we need to do it this way, and have some ownership, then that's not going to continue to grow and develop, right? So we need to have a system, and history has shown that we want systems that aren't centralized or censorable. And who are the people that have it? The people who control the money, right? I mean, so fix the money, fix the world. Tie it all back together.
Yeah, totally. And shout out to Nostr. It completely fixes this one because you cannot be censored on there. You literally, if every single relay, blocks you from being able to put your message on there, you can start your own relay, and anyone who wants to hear you can connect to your relay and still hear your message. So you're completely self-sovereign and you have reach, but freedom for all. And that's incredible. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Such a huge thing. And Bitcoin does the same thing for the money through the node network as well, which is exciting stuff. And there's just no way to think about how vast the benefits will be from this and how much things will change. And of course, people need to be prepared for all the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's going to be coming. People are going to try to scare you and say, oh, free speech is has all these bad problems. People are going to be saying mean things. And, there's going to be some wrong things out there, of course.
Sure.
I say we need to go to a place where people need responsibility again to actually work through the processes themselves and not be getting everything fed directly from the government through these centralized institutions that are funded by fiat.
Yeah, and I don't know why it reminded me of the Mike Tyson quote. It's something about how people talking on the internet, it's taken away I'm screwing up the phrase, but something about like they're not as worried about getting punched in the mouth, right? Whereas I think we've kind of made a society of softies by taking away that responsibility to learn from your own mistakes. Like you're not getting that pain response, and therefore you're not learning. Like I think you asked earlier about Bitcoin, and you were talking about what's going to make it click for somebody. A lot of it is the pain. The Canadian truckers, they learned really quick. All the people, oppressed in the Middle East and Africa and all that, they learned really quick what censorship does, and they learned really quick what a censorship-resistant system can do for them.
Yeah, and I just looked up the quote so we can make sure we have it here.
Thank you, God.
Mike Tyson said, social media made y'all way too comfortable disrespecting people not getting punched in the face for it.
Here it is.
Beautifully said.
Don't ask me to quote anything else.
Yeah, I love it.
I'll leave the quotes to you.
Yeah, real quick before we go to the next one, I brought up Socrates earlier as an example you used. Could you give us the story of Socrates just so we don't leave people hanging on that for those that don't know?
Yeah, for sure. Ripe old man of 71 years old back in BCE. He was the guy that was being censored. He would meet with young Athenians, and he would just riff with them, like think with them, think out loud, philosophy, the love of wisdom, right? And the officials did not like that. They did not like their young men who are going to become soldiers and everything thinking for themselves. So they basically sentenced him to death. And interestingly, they were going to give him a free pass as long as he publicly changed his mind. He was like, yeah, I'm my bad. And he chose not to out of principle. He said no. And he ended up drinking the hemlock, and that's how he died. I wanted to find his exact quote. He attacked the morality of the court by saying, "For if you think that by killing men you can avoid the accuser censoring your lives, you are mistaken. That is not the way of escape, which is either possible or honorable." That is not a way of escape which is either possible or honorable. The easiest, noblest way is not to be crushing others, but to be improving yourselves. And that goes back to that leader, being a leader. Just improve
It's
yourself.
amazing. Yeah. We need more people with those principles mindsets that will stand up for what's right. I really think that is a huge thing
Almost
that we're missing in the
2,500
world
years
right
ago,
now.
where did that go? Like,
Yeah.
how did that get so far away from just that thought's been around, right?
Yeah, we're just like your book says, history echoes Bitcoin. We keep seeing that coming back over and over again, where we come to these places where we are, as a human species, facing these centralized forces within our ranks that are, suppressing our potential. And this could be the time that breaks all those paradigms open if we do it properly, which is why it's so exciting. Having Bitcoin and Nostr, these things that completely shift this game in a way that those old people didn't have those tools back in the day. But we could potentially have the tool that fixes this and changes the course of history.
Well, and this is like a little aside, but you know how like they always argue, is Bitcoin a currency? Is it a commodity? Is it an asset? What is it? And if you think about it, it's like the platypus analogy. Bitcoin is a platypus. Have you ever listened to that before?
I haven't. No, I need an introduction to that.
That was my dog's fault. I'm sorry. She's getting loungy. The platypus, I'm going to probably not do it justice, but basically scientists, when they first found the platypus, couldn't figure out how to describe it. It's got
yeah, now it's coming back to me. It's like everyone looks at a different part of it and they have a different definition.
It's like the elephant. Well, but the thing is, when you look at it in this view of what we're talking about, all these different arcs of properties coming together, coalescing, I can understand why people have a hard time with it, because it does solve a lot of problems simultaneously, potentially. I mean, I believe it does. So that's what it's hard to see. It's because it's like, oh, it's a money. How is money? Like if you don't even know the problem, then how do you think money? And it's not even that. It's like, it's money. It's philosophy. It's governance. It's all of these things.
It's time.
It's time. Money is time. Money is karma. It's all of this. And so I can understand why somebody wouldn't get it right off the bat.
Yeah, completely. It's a big beast to get through, and grok, like you said. And that's why people the way that I approach talking to someone, and I try to use this show to do that as well for people, is find that thing that they care about the most, like we talked about earlier, and figure out what their pain point is, so you can just only focus on the part that fixes what they're looking for. I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Cool. Number 6, open source collaboration. How has that played a part in history? I think that kind of ties in with the last one, actually. You're talking about Socrates, just having that open source collaboration with the students.
Right.
And, that's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, 100%. I liked the story of Liechtenstein, how it's just a lot of different communities together. It is about, I'll probably get this wrong. I mean, generally speaking, maybe not academically speaking, it's very libertarian minded in that these groups come together. There's no like single leadership, even though there is, but it's a weird structure because it's not king, prince. The community can vote him out. If they don't, so it's like this duality of like the old system of kings and queens and the new system of democracy, but it just works together in that there is enough checks and balances, and everything is so open to the community that that information flows. Like, I mean, just recently, all the releasing of all the classified documents, that you would think that'd be less likely to happen over in a Liechtenstein. You know what I mean? It's just the open source collaboration between whatever the government structure is and the community is very fluid. And I found that very interesting. And that kind of just shows that we've been looking for systems where we're allowed to see the code, you know, while it's being written.
Yeah, even before it was code as we know it today, like written on a computer, there are just so many examples of this where throughout, like, and we just keep coming back to the same point of just allowing humans to collaborate, work together, and be their full creative selves without suppression.
Yeah.
It just creates this, it fosters an environment where a lot more flourishing happens. And there's just infinite possibilities out there once you open those things up, and Bitcoin and Nostr do that. Cool. Two lefts. Immutability.
I have the petroglyphs, the 10 Commandments, Newton's laws of motion, the Watergate scandal, Julian Assange. Anyone you want to jump into?
Your favorite one? They all sound good to me.
Oh shoot!
I feel like Snowden and Assange are two like really present current ones.
Those are pretty obvious, though, right?
True.
Yeah, I mean, people trying. That's low hanging fruit almost. No disrespect to them. I mean, now we got Ross free. We need a free Snowden. You know what I mean? I'd say I just find the petroglyphs interesting because it's like back then it was
what are those exactly? Because I know hieroglyphs were like the
cave. Like,
okay, is it different than hieroglyphs?
60,000 years ago, the petroglyphs. What I said.
Okay. Is that different than hieroglyphs though?
Hieroglyphs, petroglyphs.
Okay, they're just cave drawings from forever ago.
Cave drawings, yeah. Right? And it's like you got to think that was like one of the first examples of like we have a thought, we have an idea, we have information that we want to store into the future. We've tried to draw in the ground, you know, into the dirt. We've tried different ways. Why not? Let's start drawing on the inside of cave. When we draw on the outside of caves, the rain comes and it washes away. I mean, it's just interesting how, like, throughout history, we've been trying to find ways to make information immutable. And now that we have Bitcoin's immutable ledger, we have that. And it lets us know the value transfer. And if value transfer underpins all of society, then wouldn't you want that to be immutable as well? I mean,
I'm really glad you went with that example because that opens up all kinds of interesting thoughts for me. Have you watched or followed Graham Hancock's work at all?
Very little.
Oh man, because he goes into that stuff. He has a Netflix special, Ancient Apocalypse, and he's been on Joe Rogan several times. He's written books.
That's where I've seen him then.
Yeah, basically just really diving into all these ancient artifacts we have. How can we use these things to predict what has actually happened in our past? And has there been a huge erasing of like an ancient civilization that was like far more advanced than us? That's what I find fascinating. Like that's part of his theory is that there were once a far more advanced species than we are right now, but they got completely wiped out by the Younger Dryas, this giant flood, basically. That's and only the things that were extremely well, underground, deep, preserved in an immutable way, like you said, give us these clues. And so he's basically going through all these clues trying to figure out what happened. And so it's super fascinating. And the cave drawing example is excellent because I mean, there's, for me personally too, because there's so many interesting conspiracy theory tie-ins here. You see like these ancient, who knows how many thousands, tens of thousands of years old drawings of like aliens and UFOs. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Like what do we do with this information? Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. 100%. And now I'm going to go, after we're done here, I'm going to go look up Graham Hancock because I want to dig in on that.
Oh, yeah. Graham Hancock. There's Randall Carlson. He's on there a bunch. Billy Carson has a bunch of super crazy episodes talking about the ancient tablets. It's fast. Like the whole history side of things is just so massive. I don't know who to believe yet because there's so many different people who are, diving through these things. And there's so much, it's all speculative, so it's hard to
do your own research almost.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. It's tough because I'm the type of person that wants to figure out the truth. I want to get to the bottom of something. But for something like this, it's so inherently difficult to really figure out the full truth because it's ancient history by definition, you know.
Yeah.
But that's why it's so much fun too, is because there's infinite things to keep looking into, and there's so much stuff out there we've never even found, you know.
Right.
How cool is that? How interesting and fascinating is that? I mean,
Like
maybe
at the
this is
bottom of
what.
the ocean, they're saying we've hardly even discovered the majority of the ocean, you know, or ocean floor. So
Yeah,
yeah,
super cool.
yeah.
Last one, scarcity. Let's go.
That's
Why does scarcity matter? I mean, we can use gold as an example. I guess that's another low hanging fruit. But are there any other ones you can think of?
what did I put? I put time, which is the most scarce asset. And I've actually grown to have a much closer relationship, or a much more intimate relationship, if you will, with my time since I started learning about Bitcoin. I don't know if that's every Bitcoiner's journey, but it's definitely been part of mine and many that I'm friends with on X. You know what I mean? This was a different chapter just because it's like episodes, like what episode for time. So I kind of went. I departed from the vignettes, and I just went with concepts. So we got time, gold, fiat, crypto in quotes. So I put altcoin, stablecoin, CBDCs, and then Bitcoin. And I just kind of compared their effects on. I don't know how you'd say it, not effects on scarcity, but here we go. Are you familiar with Thomas Sowell?
Yes, legend.
A legend, right. I put his quote to lead off the whole chapter. The first lesson of economics is scarcity. There's never enough of anything to fully satisfy all those who want it. The first lesson of politics is to disregard the first lesson of economics. So the whole idea of never enough anything to fully satisfy all who want it, well, obviously time. We're spending it, and I feel like we're spending it well, right? We're not just wasting it. We're trying to improve.
Thanks to Bitcoin in a lot of ways, which is crazy how it really just shifts your mindset to think, you know, much lower time preference.
It really does. And we used gold to do that for hundreds of thousands of years, right? Not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds thousands of years. And the reason it's scarce is because the amount that we can pull out each year is is small, you know, like 1% to 2%, right? As opposed to the other things that we used to use in the past, beads and whatever. And you can read the Bitcoin Standard, Island of Yap, you know, we can get in. But the scarcity, the quote I think I used in the book, I had to quote Jeff Booth because his concept of scarcity or abundance of money leads to scarcity in other areas of society or elsewhere, and scarcity of money leads to abundance in society. To me, that's really what scarcity is about. And when you look at all of these CBDCs, altcoins, fiat, those specifically, because they're not scarce, they don't respect our time, our energy, our karma, whatever you want to say, our value that we own. And Bitcoin is more scarce than gold, or I think it's now, has crossed like that stock to value, not stock to value,
stock to flow ratio, I think.
Flow ratio.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it's past gold as now the hardest asset, right? So why wouldn't you want the most valuable asset that we each individually have is our time? Why not trade it for something that is the most scarce, so it holds the value the longest or the best? All of those other ones, the fiat, the altcoins, this probably stable coins, probably CBDCs, right? They didn't respect it. They don't respect it. XRP. I mean, what are we talking about here, right? I mean, Doge. You know, how many Doge each year increase another million or 10 million? I don't know. Who cares? It's all inflationary. Fiat is inflationary. Gold, you can pull more out of the ground if the price goes up, or less if the price goes down. So Bitcoin, it's not only scarce, but it has that scheduled release, right? So therefore, you have it is the most dominant asset to hold our time and our value. So to me, that whole Bitcoin is time thing is very important to understand before you really get all of Bitcoin.
Could not agree more, man. Thank you for going through each of those with me.
Yeah, man.
I know it's a little cookie cutter, but I think that every single one of those is so valuable to really tie that line between the historical examples we've already seen and with what we're looking at right now. Because when people do that, you can just see that history is repeating again, and we have the chance to really change the course of history right now and stop making these mistakes we've made over and over and over again for hundreds or thousands of years. This is powerful.
And more like I gave away the ending in the beginning, but all of those are literally things that we've all wanted and we've all searched for and we all yearned for and we all like tinkered with. Like if you look at the cypherpunk history, the 40-year history leading up to Bitcoin, they were still tinkering with it. That was just like the tip of the spear being formed. And then all of those things came together in Bitcoin. And once you kind of understand that, then you have to take that step back with a little bit of reverence and be like, oh, shit, we're onto something here.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Man, this has been such an amazing conversation just from the educational side, the AI, which wasn't expected, going through your book, and just all these different things. I don't even know what the title of this is going to be. It's going to probably be a long one. I always try to have a title that sums things up, but sometimes it's not possible.
It's hard.
And that is a sign of a great episode because there are a lot of things to talk about out there, and we got to do it. So, Tim Niemeyer, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. Is there anything else you want to add on here that we didn't get to?
Support your local communities, Bitcoiners. If you're a Bitcoiner, listen to this, find ways to find your ikigai, and it'll probably involve Bitcoin if you've been in Bitcoin for any amount of time. Right. And, I truly believe Bitcoin is systematized karma. We have the ability to keep and transact our value with people that helps build the world to make a better place. And this is the system that I choose to live my life in to do it. So thank you for your contributions. Thank you for having me on. Keep doing what you're doing. You keep spreading the word, and that's all we can do. Good ideas don't require force. We just got to help teach the world the benefits of Bitcoin.
Amen, brother. Where can people go follow your work and get your book and all that good stuff?
Books on Amazon, History Echoes Bitcoin. I'm on X, Tim_Niemeyer_ NIEMEYER. I have Lincoln Land Bitcoins on there too. Also on Nostr, Tim Niemeyer. Check out Mara.com. There's some great writing going on there. Priyag and the guys over there just do fantastic work. I'm honored to be working with them. Check out Operation Bitcoin if you know any veterans. Send them that way. You should reach out to Ben yourself. You should reach out to Scott Lindbergh and also like Hector Alvaro in Me Premier Bitcoin.
I took a note of that. I will for sure.
Yeah, those guys are educators. I'm leaving out a lot of educators, but education, like we said, think globally, act locally. Visit your meetup. If you don't have one, start a meetup. You know what I mean? We're the nodes on the network. So that's how we got to continue to act and spread the good word.
Love it. And couldn't agree more. Tim Niemeyer, thank you so much for joining me, sir. It was an absolute pleasure. I look forward to keeping in touch, my friend.
Thank you, Ben. It's been an honor.